Steve Nash, the new coach of the Brooklyn Nets. Like, it just sounds so weird right now. How's it going to work, Ryan? I mean, Kyrie, obviously KD and Kyrie had to sign off on this thing, right? I mean, we know that, but it may look good on the surface with Kyrie because obviously he's going to be tutored by one of the greatest at his position of all time. But this guy has no coaching experience, and he's now coaching two of the biggest egos in the NBA, period.
Boy, Jeff, you make great points, and I think there are more extreme strengths and weaknesses about this job, reasons to do it, reasons not to do it, than any I can remember in recent NBA history. On the plus side, on the one hand, you have Kevin Durant, who, when he's healthy, is arguably the best scorer. I think he is the best scorer in the league. He may be the best player in the league, but he's also, on the negative side, he's coming off a torn Achilles, which, as a 15-plus year former executive, is the last injury. If you talk to any sports science staff in the NBA today, any team doctor or trainer, they will say they'd rather have a guy tear his ACL or have a significant knee injury, anything else but a blown Achilles. That's the last one they want, and that's what Kevin Durant is now coming off of. So that's, some strengths and weaknesses there. Kyrie Irving, maybe the most polarizing player in the NBA today. We all see his individual ball handling talent, his scoring brilliance. We also see the mood swings, the sudden shifts in behavior and play. So it's a tough one. I mean, it's a tough one. Again, a lot of strengths. They are in a destination market. They have a brand new owner in Joe Tsai, who I've heard very good things about, and is one of the wealthiest owners in the NBA and seems very willing to spend and do whatever it takes to win. They have some talented players on the roster led by Durant and Irving. But how do guys like Karis LeVert, who was great in the bubble, Spencer Dinwiddie, who played terrific, especially before Kyrie arrived, and then when Kyrie was out of the lineup this year, how do they react to all that? And guys, what I keep coming back to, because being the GM of the Phoenix Suns for 5+ years, I spent a little bit of time around Steve Nash, not a lot, but a little between there. And also after I got fired by the Suns, I went and visited the Warriors and a little around him a little bit there. The thing I keep coming back to, guys, is he's a really nice guy. And you guys know that, but the NBA, as Bob knows as well as anybody, can be a dog-eat-dog in the locker room. So that's the question I have with Steve. Not the basketball acumen or the know-how. He obviously has that, but is he willing to put his foot down and command respect in the locker room? I don't know. It remains to be seen, and he certainly has some strong personalities to deal with in Brooklyn's locker room.
There's another aspect of this that's going to materialize, and I know it has already in one source, and he won't be the only one. The potential blowback about the fact that he is a Caucasian without experience, Hall of Famer, of course, and there are qualified black people, including one who's won a championship. And I'm sure he's going to get a job. I'm betting Tyler winds up in Philly. But there are others that are sitting out there. Mark Jackson, I'm not a big particular fan of his, but he certainly has credentials that you can't ignore. Jason Kidd.
What were the credentials, Bob? What were Mark Jackson's credentials as a coach? They're average. I heard Stephen A. Smith on this shit. And I'm not lying.
I'm just saying, it's going to hear about. Look, I'm not a big fan of Mark Jackson, and I got myself in trouble by overreacting to Mark Jackson to the replacement, of Kerr. I thought he took him to water, couldn't make him drink. But you're going to hear about it. It's going to be in the climate we're living in the world of social justice that we're talking. It will not be ignored. And Stephen, I'll name the name. Stephen A. won't be the only one. He just happened to have the forum today first. That's all.
A lot of people went against him right away. Jay Will, Damian Woody. Most people are looking at this and saying, listen, Steve Nash, one of the greatest ever, unbelievable basketball mind. And ultimately, KD and Kyrie signed off on this.
Oh, it's really interesting, though. Yeah, I of course they had to. And Ryan, how did he – well, it was just out of nowhere. I mean, I read the New York papers every day. I literally read the Post 6 out of 7 days, every day but Sunday, and I go online if I want to. I read the Times is no good for news anymore, but the Post is your news source. The name was never once mentioned, never. I mean, this is very similar to when Danny hired Brad. No one on the outside had the slightest idea that was going to happen. But in this case, you had all the speculation about the Ty Lues and about the others. Ryan, how do you have meetings in the dead of night, like in Watergate, in the parking garage? How do you have these meetings that people don't know about, or how do you have this contact, that nobody gets a whiff of?
It's based on relationships and trust, Bob, as so much is in the NBA and pro sports in general. And I bring that up because here in Phoenix, I still live in Arizona, and being GM of the Phoenix Suns for 5+ years, the history of the franchise. And Sean Marks, the GM of the Brooklyn Nets, and Steve Nash were not only teammates, they're very close personal friends. And so, guys, I don't think, without revealing too much, I know that teams have reached out to Steve Nash. Multiple teams have reached out to Steve Nash in the past about either being a head coach, being in the front office. Obviously, he was a consultant in Golden State. Now, the interesting thing there was, keep in mind, I visited the Warriors the past couple of years and spent a lot of time around their team in preseason and training camp, things like that. Nash did not live in the Bay Area. He lived in L.A. and commuted, so he was only around a few days a month. It's not like he was there. You guys know what it's like to be a head coach or an assistant coach. It's a 30-day a month job minimum. If you even have one day off, you're lucky. Nash kind of came and went and did some broadcasting. He's involved in ownership of a Spanish soccer team. So he's a pretty diversified guy. So on the one hand, he hasn't been in the trenches as a coach and grinded, for 15+ hours a day. That has not been the job. Now, on the other hand, I think the good news for Brooklyn Nets fans, and one of the things that I imagine was attractive to Joe Tsai, the owner, and Sean Marks, the GM, was Steve Nash doesn't need this job. As you guys know, he doesn't need the money. He made a lot of money as a player. He's a smart guy. He's got, the broadcasting, the soccer team. He's got endorsement deals. So to me, it shows he really wants to do this. He's committed to it. He wants it. And I think, that there are the issues that you guys brought up, and I agree with the issues, but I also agree with Steve Nash taking the job because, as you guys know, at the end of the day, talent wins in the NBA, and they have one of the most talented rosters in the Eastern Conference, maybe in the entire NBA. So if I were a head coach and I could pick and choose my first job, I would take the most talented team available and then hope I could make the egos work out rather than try to take a less talented team and build it because, guys, to use the same example from the same franchise, Kenny Atkinson just did that, and look what happened to him. He went with a rebuilding team. He did a great job. The players got better, and then he got fired, and Nash comes in to try to take him to the next level.
Well, would he be advised, or is he beyond this state, to find a veteran consigliere type of guy that has coached in the NBA and might just he be able to maybe bounce things off, which has been a traditional thing so often in the NBA. I remember when Chuck Daly went from Penn directly to the 76ers. First move he did was to hire Jack McMahon and to get a wise old head. And I don't know, but he's Steve Nash. I mean, his credentials are unquestioned. But I mean, I just wondering, do you think that would be an advisable thing, or not?
I do, Bob, but keep in mind he's going to retain a guy on staff in Jacque Vaughn, who now has a decent amount of head coaching experience between Orlando and recently with Brooklyn. So that helps as well. Jacque's going to be his lead assistant. But I think there is a step beyond that because Steve is a brand new coach and Jacque is still a relatively young coach. Yeah. So I think there's a guy, whether it's doing what they did in L.A. with the Lakers. Frank Vogel's a more experienced head coach, but as you know, they got a lot of experience on that bench with Lionel Hollins. With Jason Kidd, with Phil Handy, who's been a long time, very successful assistant. So I'd look at something like that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bench assistant. One of the other models in the NBA, guys, is bringing like a coaching consultant or coaching advisor, a guy that you guys know, you've been around the league for a long time. Gordy Chiesa is a guy who's maybe not a household name, but revered by coaches. He was around the Jazz with Jerry Sloan and those guys for a long time. So somebody in that role who maybe is not on the bench, is not in the trenches, but can come to practice, can come to the games, and maybe take a step back and being outside the room, look at the team and the coaching staff objectively and say, guys, here's what I think you're doing well, and here's what I think you can improve on, speaking from a very experienced perspective.
In the abstract now, just in the abstract, the idea of the guy, Vaughn, sticking around as the assistant, that's surprising to you?
It's a little bit surprising to me, and I give a lot of credit to Jacque Vaughn for this because it's he has to subvert his ego, in my opinion, to do that. Anybody who has been the head coach now as an assistant, I think that's a lot easier to do with a different franchise. That happens all the time, right? If with the Phoenix Suns, if I got demoted instead of fired, I would have been more upset about that. Just all right, like maybe I'll go back and work with another team somewhere in a job like I had in Boston or whatever. That's more palatable from an ego perspective. So I give Jacque Vaughn a lot of credit. I think Steve Nash will rely on him heavily because not only has he coached the team, in my opinion, very successfully, guys. Keep in mind, one of the things we cover on our Scallon Palace show on radio.com is some of the sports betting angle. And I bring it up because the over-under for the Brooklyn Nets going into the bubble in Orlando in the 8 seeding games was 1.5. And I didn't know if they were going to win 2 games. As you guys know, they were 5-3, and they were a Karis LeVert step back away from going 6-2 without, 5 out of their top 6 or 6 out of their top 7 players, and that was Jacque Vaughn.
Jeff and I were joking about the roster that they went in there with, about who's kidding who, how they're going to win a game. And they certainly achieved, and some of that credit has to go to Jacque Vaughn. I mean, he really did a good job. And so I just find it very interesting that he would stay. And you're right, that tells me a lot about Jacque Vaughn. I mean, I like
that. And I wonder if it would be a short stay, Bob, just to the extent that there are other head coaching jobs open, and I think Jacque Vaughn would be a candidate for some of those. If I'm in the Chicago Bulls front office or the New Orleans Pelicans front office in particular, 2 younger, talented teams that, need to build it, he'd be on the short list of guys I personally would want to talk to as an executive.